My family exploited me for 20 years without paying a single cent, while my useless cousin was treated like royalty. But when I discovered their plan to replace me, after I saved their business, I sold my 40% and left them to fail alone. I'm 34 years old, I work in digital marketing for a tech company, and I need to tell this story because basically, I spent over 20 years of my life being exploited by my own family, while my useless cousin was treated like royalty without doing absolutely anything. And the worst part is that for a long time I thought it was normal, that this was how families worked, that I had to put up with all of it because it was the right thing to do. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I guess I should start from the beginning. My grandfather founded a barbecue restaurant chain back in the 60 seconds. You know, one of those places with secret recipes and all that stuff. By the time I was born, the business was already pretty successful, with like 6 or 7 locations in the area. My dad and my Uncle Mark were equal owners after my grandfather retired, and for as long as I can remember, it was always this big family pride thing. You know, Grandpa's legacy and all that. The problem is that legacy ended up being the perfect excuse to screw up my life for years. I was 10 years old when I started working at the restaurants. 10 years old. I mean, I should have been playing video games or doing sports or whatever normal 10-year-old kids do. But no, I was cleaning tables, washing dishes, and doing all the dirty work that nobody else wanted to do. And when I say I started working, I don't mean I went on weekends for a couple hours. No, I literally worked after school almost every day and full weekends. My dad said it was important that I learn the business from the ground up, that I had to understand every aspect of the operation, that Grandpa had built this with his own hands, and I had to honor that legacy. Basically every motivational speech you can imagine about hard work and family values and blah blah blah. What made me the angriest, and this is what really ate at me inside for years, is that my cousin Justin, my Uncle Mark's son, never did anything, nothing. This guy was the same age as me. We were literally born 3 months apart. But while I was there with my hands destroyed from scrubbing pans and smelling like barbecue smoke all the time, Justin was at home playing PlayStation or hanging out with his friends. And when I'd ask my dad why Justin didn't have to work, he'd always tell me the same thing. That I shouldn't worry about what others were doing. But it was impossible not to notice something was wrong when I'd see Justin show up at family events, all relaxed while I'd arrive straight from the restaurant, dead tired. The thing is, this continued throughout my entire adolescence. I worked at those restaurants without receiving a single penny for years. Every time I brought up the topic of payment, my dad would tell me that family doesn't pay each other, that I was investing in my future, that someday all this would be partially mine anyway. My mom would also get involved with her own guilt trips, saying I was being selfish, that Grandpa would be disappointed in me if he knew I was asking for money, that family was the most important thing. And I, being a teenager who didn't know better, swallowed it all. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, but when you're inside that dynamic, it's almost impossible to see it clearly. Meanwhile, Justin basically didn't exist in the business context. He'd show up at family dinners, eat for free at the restaurants when he wanted, and everyone treated him like he was the future CEO or something. My Uncle Mark always talked about him like he was some kind of business genius, saying things like Justin had strategic vision, that he was learning by observing, that his approach was more executive. Pure nonsense, really, because the guy didn't even know how the cash register worked, but apparently that didn't matter. When I turned 18, I made the most important decision of my life up to that point. I told my family I was going to study marketing at university, and you can't imagine the drama that unfolded. My dad literally told me I was betraying the family, that the business needed me, that I was being irresponsible and selfish. My mom cried. And when I say she cried, I mean that manipulative type of crying that makes you feel like the worst person in the world. They told me that if I was going to study that, which wasn't necessary for the family business, I'd have to pay for it myself because they weren't going to finance my decision to abandon Grandpa's legacy. Can you believe it? After years of working for free for them, years of sacrificing my adolescence, they were denying me help for university because I had chosen a career that wasn't restaurant management or something like that. But you know what? In that moment, something activated in me. For the first time in my life, I told them no, that I was going to go to university anyway. and that I was going to pay for it myself. And that's exactly what I did. I got 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop during the day and another at a bar on weekends, took out student loans, and basically killed myself working for 4 years to pay for my education. It was really hard. I'm not going to lie. There were moments when I thought I wasn't going to make it. But every time I felt tempted to give up and go back to my family, I'd remember all those afternoons washing dishes without getting anything in return, and that would give me more anger, more motivation to keep going. During those 4 years, my family basically cut me off. I'd go to Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners because my mom would make me feel horrible if I didn't, but it was uncomfortable as hell. My dad barely talked to me. My Uncle Mark completely ignored me. And the worst part is everyone would talk wonders about Justin, who supposedly was now working in the business and had incredible ideas to expand it. Spoiler alert number 2. Justin was still not doing anything useful, but now he had a fancy title of operations assistant or something like that, basically a position my dad and uncle invented to make it look like the guy did something. I graduated at 23 and got a job in digital marketing for a medium-sized company. It wasn't anything amazing at first, but it was mine, you know? It was something I had achieved on my own, without my family's help, without having to put up with their manipulations and guilt trips. I felt free. It literally was like I had lifted a giant weight off my shoulders. I was earning my own money. I had my own apartment. I could make my own decisions without having to hear speeches about Grandpa's legacy every 5 minutes. But the thing with toxic families is they never completely leave you alone. During the next 3 years, my family didn't stop calling me, sending me messages, showing up at my apartment unannounced, all to try to convince me to come back to the business. My mom was the worst. She used all kinds of emotional tactics. She'd tell me my dad was getting old and needed help, that the business wasn't the same without me, that I had natural talent for this. My dad was more direct, basically telling me I was wasting my potential in a corporate job with no future when I could be building something real with the family. And the truth is, part of me wanted to believe them. As much as I had managed to become independent, as much as I was proud of what I had achieved alone, there was still this part of me that wanted my family's approval, that wanted to feel like I belonged, that wanted to prove to them that I was worth as much or more than Justin. It's incredible how family manipulation can get so deep in your head that even though you know rationally something is wrong, emotionally, you're still hooked. Eventually, at 26 years old, I made what was probably the biggest mistake of my life up to that point. I gave in. I went back to the family business. They convinced me with promises that things would be different, that now they would value me appropriately, that I was going to have a real leadership role and not just be the person who does the dirty work. My dad even offered me a decent salary and told me I could implement marketing strategies that the business desperately needed. It sounded good on paper, and I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things had changed. Spoiler alert number 3. Things hadn't changed one bit. I started working with all these ideas to modernize the business. I wanted to create social media presence, implement a loyalty program, improve customer experience, all the things I had learned in my marketing job. But every time I proposed something, there was immediate resistance. My dad would say, "That's not how Grandpa did things." My Uncle Mark would say, I was trying to change something that already worked. And Justin, who supposedly was the operations assistant, basically sabotaged everything I tried to do. What killed me is that Justin kept being treated like the golden child even though the guy didn't do anything productive whatsoever. He'd arrive late every day. He'd be on his phone for hours. He'd take naps in the office. And when important decisions had to be made, everyone would turn to look at him as if his opinions were worth something. And his opinions were always the most basic and obvious things in the world, like we should sell more or we should spend less, things any person with 2 brain cells would say. But my dad and uncle treated him like he was Steve Jobs reincarnated. I lasted exactly 1 year. 1 year of constantly feeling ignored, of seeing how my ideas were rejected without even considering them, of having to report to Justin on some things even though I had more experience and education than him. The breaking point was when I proposed a marketing campaign that I had designed completely, with budget, timeline, success, metrics, everything. And my dad told me Justin had to approve it first. Justin, who didn't know the difference between SEO and SEM, who thought Instagram was just for teenagers, who had never even created a Facebook post in his life. So, I quit. I told them I was leaving and this time I wasn't coming back. My mom tried the same show as always with the tears and the guilt, but I wasn't biting the hook anymore. I told them they'd had their chance, that I had come back with good intentions, and they had decided to waste my time and my talent. My dad got furious. He told me I was ungrateful, that after everything the family had done for me, I was abandoning them again. I reminded him that the family had never done anything for me except exploit me, and I left. I went back to my marketing career, got a better job than the previous one, and for the next 3 years I basically had no contact with my family except for occasional messages and some awkward dinner on holidays. I was fine with that, honestly. I had made peace with the fact that my family and I probably were never going to have a normal relationship. And then 2020 came, and the pandemic basically destroyed the family business. The barbecue restaurants were among the most affected because their model depended heavily on dine-in service, on the complete experience, and with lockdowns and capacity restrictions, they went to shit. They closed 3 of the 7 locations they had, the other 4 were barely surviving, and suddenly my dad and Uncle Mark were desperate. They called me at the end of 2020, and for the first time in my life I heard my dad admit they had made mistakes. He told me the business was in serious trouble, that they needed help from someone who really knew about marketing and modernization, and that they had been stupid not to value what I could contribute. He offered me something I never thought he'd offer: 40% ownership stake in the business and full operational control. Basically, he was telling me I could do whatever I wanted with the business if I managed to save. I should have told them no. I should have learned my lesson after the 2 previous times. But there was something tempting about the idea of taking that business that had caused me so much pain for years and transforming it into something successful on my terms. And also, I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that wanted to prove to everyone, especially Justin, that I was the one who really had the skills to make this work. So I accepted, but this time with real legal contracts, with my stake properly documented, with my responsibilities and authority clearly defined. I started working at the business in 2021, and the first thing I did was fire Justin. Yes, you read that right. I fired him. My Uncle Mark went crazy. My dad tried to mediate, but I had operational control and I showed them the numbers. Justin was earning a 6-figure salary, literally doing nothing productive, and the business was bleeding money. I told them either Justin left or I left, and they needed me, more than they needed Justin. Justin left and basically the family drama multiplied by 1,000. My Uncle Mark hated me. My mom told me I had been cruel. The entire extended family saw me as the villain who had kicked out poor Justin. But you know what? I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions that were right for the business, without letting family politics stop me. But the next 2 years were probably the most intense of my professional life. I implemented everything I had wanted to do years ago and more. I created social media presence, designed a loyalty program, implemented online ordering, improved staff training, renegotiated contracts with suppliers, basically revolutionized every aspect of the operation. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of resistance from my dad and uncle at first, but numbers don't lie. By the end of 2022, the 4 restaurants that remained were profitable again. We had recovered a ton of customers we had lost during the pandemic, and we were even considering opening a 5th location. I was proud. Honestly, it was the first time I felt like my work at the family business had meant something real. I had literally saved Grandpa's legacy that everyone cared so much about. I thought things had finally changed, that my family finally saw me as a valuable member and not just free labor. And then I discovered the truth. It was by pure chance. I overheard a conversation between my dad and Uncle Mark that I wasn't supposed to hear. They were talking about succession planning for the business, about how now that things were stable again, it was time to think about the long-term future. And my uncle said something that froze me. We should start preparing Justin to return as CEO in a couple years. Ryan has done a good job stabilizing everything, but Justin is direct family and has the long-term vision we need. My dad agreed. He said, I was good with execution and the technical part, but that Justin had the leadership skills the business would need in the future. Basically, they were planning to use all my work, all my experience, all my sacrifices to stabilize the business and then bring Justin back so he could take all the credit and control. I stood there, listening to this conversation, and something inside me just broke. It wasn't just anger. It was like this absolute clarity that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how many times I saved the business, for my family, I was always going to be second class compared to Justin. It wasn't about skills or results or hard work. It was simply that my Uncle Mark had more power than my dad in their relationship, and he was always going to favor his son no matter what. I didn't say anything that day. I went home, thought about it all night, and the next morning I called my lawyer. We reviewed the contracts, reviewed my 40% stake, reviewed all the clauses we had negotiated when I came back to the business. Turns out I had the right to sell my stake at any time with a 90-day notice period, and the other partners had to buy it at market value or get an external buyer that I approved. 2 weeks later, I presented my formal resignation and my intention to sell my stake. My dad thought I was bluffing, that it was another temporary tantrum, like when I was 26. I showed him I was serious when my lawyer sent all the formal documents. The market value of my 40%, with the business stabilized and growing, was significantly higher than what it had been when I entered in 2021. We're talking about a difference of several $100,000. My dad and uncle didn't have the cash to buy me out immediately. They had to get a loan, sell some personal assets. It was total chaos for them. My mom called me every day crying, telling me I was destroying the family, that Grandpa would be rolling in his grave. I told them I had spent over 20 years destroying myself for this family, and that was enough. The sale process took about 5 months. It was 5 months of lawyer calls, tense meetings, my family trying to make me feel guilty every chance they got. But this time I didn't give in. Every time I felt my determination wavering, I'd remember that conversation I had overheard. I'd remember all the times they had used me, and that gave me strength to keep going. We finally closed the sale in August of last year. I received my money, signed all the non-compete and confidentiality papers, and basically ended my relationship with the family business forever. My dad barely spoke to me during the entire closing process. My Uncle Mark didn't even show up to the final meeting. He sent his lawyer instead. Justin, of course, hadn't been involved in any of this because he still hadn't returned to the business. But from what I heard later, my uncle started pushing to bring him back, almost immediately after I left. That was like a year ago, and I'm not going to lie, the first few months were weird. As much as I was at peace with my decision, there's something final about closing that chapter of your life so permanently. But every day that passed, I felt lighter, freer, more myself than I had felt in decades. And here comes the part that gives me a satisfaction I probably shouldn't admit but is real. I heard last week that the business is in trouble again. After I left, they brought Justin back as director of operations, just like they had planned, and apparently the guy has been systematically reversing all the changes I implemented. He canceled the loyalty program because it was too complicated to manage, reduced social media presence because he didn't like dealing with negative comments, removed online ordering because he said it didn't generate enough profit margin. Basically, he took a business that was working well and is returning it to the outdated model that almost drove them to bankruptcy in the first place. From what I was told, they already closed one of the 4 remaining restaurants, and the other 3 are barely surviving. My dad is apparently desperate again, but his pride won't let him admit he made a mistake, letting me go. My Uncle Mark keeps insisting Justin just needs more time to find his leadership style. It's almost comical if it weren't so sad. Do I feel bad for them? Honestly, not really. They had decades to treat me better. They had multiple opportunities to value what I contributed, and every time they chose to favor Justin over me regardless of results. Sometimes people have to live with the consequences of their decisions, and this is what happens when you value family politics over merit and hard work. I'm doing fine. I have a job I like. I used the money from selling my stake to buy my first real apartment. I have friends who support me. And for the first time in my life, I don't have to carry the weight of my family's toxic expectations. I haven't talked to my dad since the sale closed. My mom sends me messages occasionally that I basically ignore, and the rest of the extended family treats me like I'm the bad guy in the story. And you know what? I'm completely at peace with that. Sometimes the best decision you can make is walk away from people who hurt you, even if those people are your family. Not all blood ties are worth keeping, and it's okay to prioritize your own mental health and happiness over loyalty to people who never valued you anyway.